Hey everyone, it's Dr. Tim and Hilary, and this is another version of the Dr. Tim's Aquatics podcast. How you doing this morning, Hilary?
I am doing great. I'm all excited. I got my cup of coffee sitting here, ready for the holidays. How about you?
Not ready for the holidays. It's like next week. Yeah.
Okay, I take that back. I'm not ready. I'm not ready knowing that it's
Yeah. It's like in 10 days. No, 9 days. Today's the 16th. Yeah, 9 days. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. Not ready.
I was
Not
sitting
ready
there
at
this
all.
morning trying to decide. I'm like, do I want to send out holiday cards to my family or is it too late? Like, I don't even have holiday cards to send out. I was going to take a picture of the pig sitting in front of or like underneath the Christmas tree and put like a Santa hat on him and send that out to all my family. I'm like, well, then that's like a day and a half to get him positioned and take the photo and then have the photos made and then mail them out. I'm like, is it worth it?
And the answer is no, but support your local post office.
Exactly. So anyway, on topic. Today we are going to be talking about media. I know we've talked about our media before, but it's been a while and I feel like it needs some extra love. So we're going to have a refresher podcast on all of our different types of media and go over all of the ones that we have, a little bit about them, and just some questions that I've come up with as you're listening to this. If you have questions, feel free to send us a message on social media, send us a message at info@drtimsaquatics.com, and we will answer your questions. So let's jump right in.
Yeah, media is a very catch-all group or category. There's a lot of different types of media, and we'll cover that. And when you need them, when you don't need them, you don't really need every one of the medias. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different types of media, depending on your situation. So some of the most common you hear about are biological media. And biomedia is basically, it's a material that provides substrate for the nitrifying bacteria to grow on. So it becomes biologically active by having the bacteria grow on it, grow in the pores. And so it's really a surface provider for your nitrifiers, because nitrifiers don't grow in the water very well. They want to be attached to a substrate or a media. Now, our media is remover, that's what it named, and basically it is a natural substance that has a positive charge, because that's the other thing. Nitrifiers like to grow on positive charged particles. And it's different than the engineered. There's not, I don't want to say there's anything wrong with these engineered medias, the ceramics and things, but don't get hooked or mesmerized by these huge claims that they provide, whatever it is, a million cubic foot per square foot of media. Because what you need is media that will stay clean and media that water can flow through. Having all this internal surface area is worthless if the water can't get to it. Because if the water can't get to it, the bacteria are not going to grow on it. And why would the water not be able to get to this internal surface area? Well, all this media will grow heterotrophs. We talk a lot about heterotrophs all the time, kind of you need them in some cases, but on media, what they're going to do is they're going to grow over the nitrifiers, and they grow much faster, and they're going to clog the pores. So what you want is more of an open structure media that you can clean easily. And by cleaning, I just mean you can take it over, and when you do the water change and you've got that bucket of old water, just take your media and rinse it. You don't have to get a power vac out there, power washer, and scrub it, anything like that. It's just getting the organic slime and the buildup of detritus and stuff off the media every once in a while. It's not something you have to do monthly, but every couple of months you should take your media out and rinse it real well and put it back in. The nitrifiers will survive this, and your media will be much more efficient in terms of water being able to get to it. Now we provide a bag for our media because that makes it convenient. But what you have to remember with any of these biomedias, like our remover and all of them, is that you need to make sure the water is going through it. So just throwing it in the corner of the sump doesn't mean, it will actually probably means the water's not going to go through it. All these systems that people use are what I'll call passive. You're not actively forcing the water to go through the media. You're putting the media in the sump, in the back of the tank, in the false wall there, and water pours down through the media, wherever it is. And it's kind of like passive in that you're hoping the water passes through it by putting the media in the water's way. So when you use the media, the biomedia in bags, whatever, try to stack it up. Try to get it so that you've got a thin layer of the media and it's in an area where the water has to go through it. Because if the water has a chance to go around, it will. We're not, like I said, we're not making it go through it. We're hoping it goes through it. And the best way to do that is to hang that bag or put that bag so that the water has to go through it. Does that make sense, Hilary?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm going to touch on a couple things. So like the way that my sump is structured in my largest tank, I've got a couple of different baffles. So in the past, I always like to try and put some of the media in the baffles. That way the water has to go through it. But I know people put them in other places. And I've heard of people saying, oh, you can put the media in, say, the filter socks. But I feel like maybe the filter socks might be an area that has way too high of flow. Is that on track?
Yes, and now you're doing two things, because what's the number one job of the filter sock is to trap organics, and even fine organics. I mean, the filter socks are down in the 600, 400, 300 microns. That's really small. So you're trapping all this organic material in there. And now you're saying, oh, let's put biomedia here where we're basically collecting all the detritus, the dirt, and it's like we're just going to bury the media. So now that's not a good idea. In the bags that we provide for our media, the openings of 1,000 microns. I mean, that's you can see it's a big opening, because that means the water can get in there. You're not collecting a bunch of detritus, and it's much easier to clean. So putting filter socks or putting biomedia into filter socks is a terrible idea. Yeah, that's a terrible idea.
So as you're talking about this, I have like the whole stack of our medias sitting here next to me. So like maybe I can describe them if need to. So I'm pulling out one of the little mesh bags, and I've got media now all over my desk.
Oops. So yeah.
They're nice. They like zip up and.
Right. The bags are really nice.
They're fantastic.
Yeah. They're not this drawstring type, because the drawstring type, you kind of lose the top third of the bag. These are zippered. It's 100% plastic, and you get the full use of the bag. And there's easy way to kind of hang it in the water as it's going through the areas. How you want to do biomedia is have mechanical filtration first. So you're filtering out as much organic as you can. And then if you're using activated carbon or something like that, which we're going to talk about because that's another one of our medias, have that second, the chemical media, and then have the biological media, where you're growing the nitrifiers, have that last in the string of things. Now, another type of media that goes along with that is our Remover Plus. And in all the medias that we do like Remover Plus, Carbon Pure, Carbon Plus, Phos-Eliminator Plus. The Plus has an extra, a bonus that it does. And with the Remover Plus, what we're doing is we're shrinking the size of the media. We're using a much smaller sized media, which that will slow the water down. And the inside of this bag that you have the media in will go slightly anaerobic, not anoxic, but an anaerobic, where the oxygen levels drop. And in there, what will happen is you'll start doing some denitrification. And it's again passive in that, you know, if you really want to do full denitrification like they do at public aquariums, you're going to be having to add an external carbon source, and it can be really hard to control because just like nitrification is two-stepped, ammonia to nitrite, nitrite to nitrate, denitrification has two steps. The nitrate is first converted to nitrite, and then the nitrite's converted to dinitrogen, nitrogen gas, which off gases. It's done by different groups of bacteria, and it's done anaerobically, meaning in the presence of a very small amount of oxygen. And a lot of times it gets stalled and you just produce nitrite. In the second step, nitrite to dinitrogen doesn't occur for various reasons. Maybe we'll do a podcast on denitrification one time. But if you don't have it controlled correctly, you can just cause yourself a lot of problems. And it's really, I think, difficult to manage a pure denitrification system in your aquarium because it's hard to keep a zone that's anaerobic. It'll either go anoxic or it'll go too much oxygen, oxic, and the bacteria stop doing the denitrification. So this system with our Remover Plus is what I call passive. You'll get some denitrification, and any bit of reduction of nitrate that you can do helps. And with this now, you wouldn't clean this as often because if you're going to rinse this and clean it, you're going to oxygenate it, which means the bacteria will stop doing denitrification. So this is a media that you put in the end of the loop after nitrification, and you kind of leave it alone, really. So that covers the first two types of media. Now I mentioned carbon, another subject that can be very controversial, but I like to have carbon in the system, and it removes what are called dissolved organics. We talked about the filter socks. They're removing particulate organics, and the particulate organics are also what clog your biomedia. But there's a whole nother group of organics that are dissolved, and this can be the material that, like tannins, that discolor the water, and the buildup of dissolved organics can actually inhibit nitrifiers. Or if you're running a freshwater system and you want that after a Central American Rio Negro, it's the Rio Negro, it's the Black Water River. The water's just black because of the heavy amount of tannins in it. And it has a very particular chemistry associated with that. And high levels of tannin inhibit nitrifiers and all sorts of other bacteria. So one way that's good, but in another way it's bad. Or if you're up in the Scandinavian with the peat bogs, they'll get, every once in a while you'll read about they found a body, and the body's 1,000 years old, and it's in this peat bog, and it's perfectly preserved. And that's because the peat puts off this tannin material, and that inhibits bacterial growth, so you don't get the breakdown of organics. And we need the nitrifying bacteria in our aquarium. So with activated carbon, again, you're going to remove those dissolved organics. And I think it has a good place. And as I mentioned earlier, it should be after mechanical filtration, because the activated carbon, if it becomes clogged with the detritus, now the water is going to take the path of least resistance. So you can have all this carbon in there, but if the water's not going through it, just like with biomedia, if the water's not going through your media, you're getting no benefit from it. So the secret to maximizing your use of any of these media is to have good mechanical filtration before any of these media.
Yes.
And then people, if I get this question, oh, how do I know if my carbon's working, not working? What can I do? Well, everybody's got a camera these days. It's on your it's on your phone. So a real easy thing to do is to take a glass, and fill it with your aquarium water, put it on a piece of white paper in good lighting, and look down through it and take a picture, and now you've got it date stamped. And do that every week or so. And you will slowly over time notice that the water starts to turn a little yellow. Well, when that happens, that tells you the carbon's no longer working and you can replace it. Carbon is one of those media where, some of these other media that we sell, you can actually recharge, but carbon is not one of them. You'll waste your time and potentially burn your house down, because it has to be done in an oxygen-free environment at about 1800 degrees. So putting this in your oven at 500 degrees, no, people do this. It's gonna stink, and lots of other problems. So just throw your carbon away. You cannot, you're not going to be able to recharge your activated carbon. Now the Carbon Plus, what we do there is we combine the activated carbon with our Phos-Eliminator, which is a media that it's obviously by the name, removes phosphate. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds. You're removing dissolved organics, plus you're removing phosphate with the Carbon Plus. Now, which one should you use? Carbon Pure, Carbon Plus? Kind of depends on your system, really. If you're really trying to control phosphate, maybe go with the Carbon Plus. But as I've mentioned many times, don't be chasing numbers and trying to get that phosphate level down to 0. That is just going to cause you all sorts of problems. So either one can be fine. If you really have high phosphate, there's going to be better ways, less expensive, more efficient ways. You can use the next product we have, Phos-Eliminator. We sell that at 100%, not mixed with anything. And that will remove large amounts of the phosphate. So, maybe go with that. Or maybe look at why you're generating so much phosphate in the first place. You're overfeeding and things like that.
Why are you calling me out?
Not talking about your pig, talking about fish.
Oh no, but I overfeed all the time.
Everybody overfeeds. That's just the nature. Yeah. Especially at Christmas time, even us. Yeah.
So before we move on, I want to touch on something else with the carbon products. I know you told us to use the glass trick and kind of look at the water. Is there an approximate timeline of on average 30 days replace it, or 45 days or whatever? The reason I'm asking is because, and the science on this may have changed, but I've heard that carbon can also lead, if you leave it in too long, can lead to health issues for the fish. So just, if you've read that information, is there a timeline? Don't leave it in past 30 days or.
Yeah, I've read lots of things, and I've read mysteries and horror stories. It's called fiction, things like that. So there are usually, usually it's every month. I would say you should change it every month. But carbon doesn't all of a sudden become bad. It's not like it's good for your fish or it does its job and nothing happens. And then, after 30 days, something that carbon changes and becomes some type of a disease or gives off things. Because that was the other thing that you heard about carbon was don't keep it in so long because after a while it releases everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's another one. I hadn't even thought about that. But yes.
Yeah. And yes, you can get things that are absorbed, it's adsorbed to carbon. You can get the carbon to release those. But in order to do that, you have to take your pH down to about 2 or above 11.
Okay.
And so if
hopefully nobody's tank should be in that situation.
Right. If your tank is in either of those situations, you've got much bigger issues than what's carbon going to do. Because that's how you can recycle trace elements and all sorts of things is by manipulating the pH. And that's way too technical, so we won't go into that. So there's really no hard evidence. There is, I'll admit, there's some anecdotal evidence that carbon can possibly cause some types of things like lateral line. But the thing is, it only happens with certain fish, and then not all carbons are equal. I mean, carbon starts off, you can make activated carbon from bituminous coal, from anthracite coal, from wood, from coconut. There's a large variety of substances that you can make activated carbon from. And then the source, is it US mined? Is it coconut from the Philippines? From something from China? So you just can't, you need to not make the mistake of just lumping all carbon as, well, it's all carbon, it's all bad, because you had this experience. So I've been using activated carbon for a long, long time in all my systems and really haven't had any issues. Freshwater, saltwater, low pH, high pH, low hardness, for some South Americans or just rock hard Colorado River water for the Tanganyikans that love that type of stuff. I'd be the first to say if I thought there were some big problem with the use of activated carbon, but I really haven't come across anything like that.
Okay. I feel the need to touch on it just because, I've worked in the aquarium industry and sometimes people are like, oh no, you shouldn't use that. That's bad. Well, I haven't had any issues with it. I use it in my tanks all the time, especially to clear up the water and make it look all nice.
Right. And and it's a problem. It's kind of like when you get into trace elements, which do you need? It's hard. You have carbon and you see something and then you say, well, that's I put in there, so that's the effect. But that's not real science. And unfortunately, there's just so much going on that it's really hard to figure out what caused what. And then I've heard people, well, I'm using activated carbon in my quarantine tank. Well, that may not be a good idea there because depending on what you're adding to your quarantine tank as a prophylactic or as a treatment, the carbon could be removing.
Yes. It's funny. So there's in humans, there are carbon supplements that you can take. And the reason people take them is to help remove the toxins in your body. And the same can be said, if you're medicating, there's a good chance the carbon's going to pull that out.
Yeah. Isn't there an activated carbon toothpaste?
Yeah, there is actually. It's supposed to help whiten your teeth. It's supposed to. I've tried it. It doesn't really work.
All I can think is that it's going to rub the enamel off your teeth. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be brushing my. Well, yeah, but you lose your enamel, you're in big trouble. Your dentist will. Your teeth are white, and your dentist will thank you very much. Put another one of her kids through college. So, excuse me. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. Yeah. Well, let's just leave the human nutrition of activated carbon now for another day. Now you can, I mean, some people will, I'll put activated carbon in after I do a water change and then I'll take it out. That's fine. Now, what I would do if you're gonna do that type of method where you just use it once in a while and then remove it, is rinse it really well, because you don't want the organics to go anaerobic in there, and as you're drying it out. So take it out, rinse it really well, put it off to the side, and you can reuse it. It's not a problem.
Not recharge it, reuse it.
Yeah, not recharge, reuse. Yes. And it's hard to say how long it goes. If you've got a tank where you're feeding a lot and producing a lot of organics, the activated carbon is not going to last as long as if you've got a reef tank where you're feeding very lightly and not, or maybe not at all. So it just kind of depends on your organic inputs, because that's really what it's removing, is the dissolved organics in the system.
Yep.
So, on to Phos-Eliminator.
On to Phos-Eliminator.
So, phosphate's one of those things everybody wants to remove it, get it low. And it is good to have it low, but you can do water changes. But our Phos-Eliminator is aluminum silicate. So it's a small bead. Definitely, because you need to put this in the fine mesh, the 300 micron opening mesh bag that's provided. You want to have this after good mechanical filtration. And you do want to have this in a pretty good high flow area. So you're bringing water to it and not letting the pile of the material just sit in the corner. Again, it's just sitting in the corner is just not going to do anything for most of these media, because you've got to get it in contact with the water. How can you tell that it's no longer working? Well, be measuring your phosphate levels, because you'll see this. You start using this, your phosphate levels will drop, and then as it's exhausted, they'll start to come up, and that will tell you that now you need to change it.
Now I have to ask, I'm curious. So sometimes when you get products, it tells you that you need to rinse them before you put them in the tank. Is this one of those products that you should rinse off? Or maybe if you're doing a water change, like dunk the bag in the...
Yeah, well, we say you should rinse it, just because what's going to happen is this product is going to fizz and it's going to generate a little bit of heat when you first get wet, because it loves water. So it gives off heat. So rinsing is always good. Plus the dust, these things have been transported from our facility to the distributor to the store to your house, and they're rubbing against each other, and there's no reason to have all the dust in there. So it's just good to get rid of the dust and things like that. So a quick rinse, and you don't have to, you can rinse under tap water with chlorine. You don't have to be paranoid about that. It's good. And carbon will also rub against itself and produce lots of fines, which you don't want in your tank. So I kind of like to rinse everything before you use it.
Good to know. Good advice.
Yeah. Now we have a Phos-Eliminator Plus. And the Phos-Eliminator Plus is a mixture of the aluminum silicate and ferric oxide, which are two different substances to remove phosphate. So you kind of get the best of both of them. And that will remove a fair amount of phosphate in the water. Now, what it's removing is, as I've talked about, the soluble reactive phosphate, the PO4. It's not doing anything for the organic phosphate that's bound to things. To remove those, you need to really siphon. You'll get all the organics out. As you can tell from this series, I'm a big fan of getting organics out of the system, because they just sit in your tank and cause problems. Clog things up, clog the biofilter, clog your carbon. So keeping their system free of organics can be a major problem, especially particulate organics, because if you've got a lot of rock work, think about this when you're decorating, when you're building that live rock, the arches and all the caves and stuff like that. Are you going to be able to clean that? Can you put a power head or some type of a water pump somewhere that you can have water flow through this to keep those particulate materials in the water column till they can be removed over the overflow, or by the filter socks or stuff like that? You want to get that stuff out of there.
I knew a guy once when I worked at a local fish store that anytime he would build and set up a new tank, he would always like put an extra power head on the initial setup and have it like inside the rock work almost, so that like it would be easy enough to take it out and clean it, but that it would help to create flow within the rocks. So that's a good idea.
That's a good idea. Or just, if because a lot of people, cords distract. You don't want a bunch of cords in your tank. But if you can just leave an opening that you can get from the top, and when you want to clean the system, put the, water pump down in there for a little while just to clean out things. It really makes a big difference. You'd be surprised how much stuff, accumulates in dead spots in your aquarium.
Mm-hmm. Those are my favorite spots to clean, like the satisfaction of seeing all the gunk come up the siphon. Yes, it's a good day in the tank.
It's a good day in the tank. Okay, Hilary.
Well, I mean, like, even if you can't see anything else as you're cleaning, like, oh, it just looks like water, you like see all that stuff come out, like, yep, I'm cleaning.
Yeah, you're doing something. Here. Yeah, you're doing something. So, okay, that's good. Yeah, you want to get that stuff out of there.
Yep.
Now we have a product we call Equalizer. An Equalizer is will remove a little bit of organics and ammonia and phosphates, and basically what it's doing there is it's a fine mesh or very fine media that's becoming biologically active and also has some chemical remover properties. So this is when, if you're doing a plant tank, for instance, freshwater plant tank, and you're really trying to grow your plants, and you're adding CO2 and plant fertilizers and stuff like that, well, this is a situation where maybe you don't want to use activated carbon, because the goal of the tank is to really have the plants, grow like crazy. And some of the micronutrients and trace elements and things like that you're putting in the system, the activated carbon can remove. So in those situations, you wouldn't use activated carbon. And the Equalizer is a media there that's, we say, less harsh. It's not as activated as the activated carbon. And it still will help control some of the discolorations and things like that can happen in the tanks. Plant tanks are we should do a podcast around plant tanks.
I like that.
You're bubbling CO2 in there, but if you don't understand the inorganic carbon cycle, remember, I just said inorganic, and we'd have to have some type of diagram, because if you have, let's say, California, we're going down a side street here for a second, Hilary, I hope that's okay. You're out here in California, you're using Southern California, and you've got this, high alkalinity, rock hard water, and pH is 8.2. You start bubbling CO2, inorganic, I mean, it's the CO2. It is immediately going to change into bicarbonate and carbonate. It's going to have no effect on it's not going to work on your plants very well, because the high pH immediately changes the CO2 into either bicarbonate or carbonate, which is not what the plants utilize. So just like with ammonia, you can have ammonium, depending upon the pH. That's the same thing with CO2. And that's why you have to be careful of how you use CO2 with your plant tank and how you use some of these automatic bubblers and automatic devices that are attached to your CO2. Because out here, you're trying to, it's based on pH. So when the pH gets up to a certain amount, it opens up the valve and it bubbles in more CO2 to drop the pH. But if you do a big water change and you forget and you use water dechlorinated right out of the tap here in Southern California that's really high alkalinity, you put that in your plant tank, the pH goes way high and the valve opens up and starts bubbling a ton of CO2 in there, and it'll knock all your fish out, because the CO2 is also an anesthetic.
That's right.
So you have to be careful and you have to understand how the alkalinity of your water affects the pH, which then feeds back to, it's immediately converting your carbon to bicarbonate or carbonate, which is not what you want. And that's a technical subject, but we should talk about that and maybe have a chart up, something visual that people can see, because I find that's people just don't understand that. They just get a CO2 bubbler and can't figure out why their pH never drops.
I've got it in my notes. Denitrification and planted tanks with visuals. Maybe we can do that when I come to visit and we're filming all the other videos.
Yeah, that'd be good. We can sit down in the lobby and have a chat.
You can do diagrams on the whiteboard. I'm ready. I'll bring my notebooks and everything.
Okay, we have a whiteboard. Okay. Now we have ZeoPure. It's a zeolite, which is a type of clinoptilolite, which is basically, if you're a geologist, you understand all these terms, but basically it's a clay-based material that has an affinity for removing ammonia from the water. But just like I was talking on CO2, the efficiency of that depends upon the pH of the water. For zeolites and how effective they're going to be, it really depends upon the hardness. The harder the water, meaning the more calcium, the more magnesium, the less ammonia that the zeolite will be able to remove. So it's good in emergency. It's actually a decent media to grow nitrifiers on, because it is positively charged, but it's pretty fine, so it clogs easily if you're trying to grow nitrifiers. But it's a real nice media to use, especially in a freshwater system, if you're trying to control ammonia and you want a good surface area for the bacteria. And there's some people trying to use this in saltwater systems. It can be used in salt water as a surface or as a biomedia, if that's what you want, but it's not going to remove, by ion exchange or chemically, any ammonia, because the salt water has too many ions. It's just not going to work that way. But it is a good media to use if you're trying to grow nitrifiers in the system. This is actually one of the media that can be recharged. And how it's recharged is you put it in a brine, like a 2 or 3 times saltwater system. So instead of instead of mixing salt water to 35 parts per thousand, mix it to about 90 parts per thousand and recirculate it through your ZeoPure, and the ammonia will come off the ZeoPure and it recharges it so that you can reuse it. And you can do this 9-10 times. So
that's pretty cool. Now, I've got a question for that. So if you are using this in a freshwater tank and you're trying to recharge it, obviously you're not going to have like the regular salt that I would be using in my saltwater tanks. Can you use something like Epsom salt or like table salt? Does it matter what kind of salt you use?
Table salt would be best because that's sodium chloride. So you don't have to use expensive sea salts. You can just use regular cheap table salt. Yep.
Good to know.
Yeah, and in a freshwater tank, now, you know, when would you use this? Well, say you're trying to get a South American tank and you want the water to be low pH and you want it to be soft for the discus and the rummy nose and the neon tetras and stuff like that. Well, from previous discussions, you realize that is going to take a while for the nitrifiers to get established because at the low pH, you know, below 6, nitrifiers don't work as well because the ammonia is in the ammonium form. Well, what you can do instead of staring at an empty tank for months and months is you can control the ammonia in that situation with our ZeoPure. It's very efficient at that because that is soft water, meaning low calcium, low magnesium, and low pH, which is like the perfect environment for ZeoPure. And you could get like a 32-ounce jar of this and get an extra bag, and you could rotate it out, have one bag in and be recharging the other. And then after a little bit of time, you know, it all depends on how many fish. I wouldn't say overcrowd a system like this, but definitely you could have some fish in there and you could be controlling the ammonia chemically initially as the nitrifiers are being established. And I'm sure the question is like, well, isn't this going to starve the nitrifiers from ammonia? And the answer is no. The nitrifiers are going to be growing slowly, but they will grow, and you're not going to inhibit their growth by taking, quote, their ammonia away. But you will help your fish because it'll be a lower ammonia environment. Now, the next media we have is our Purifier. And this is basically a man-made filter resin. So it's used to remove dissolved organics through ion exchange and works in salt water because it's removing organics. That's what this is actually detailed for. You can do ion exchange medias to soften your water, to remove calcium and magnesium, but that's not what this is. This is to remove dissolved organics. A little bit goes a long ways, and it will also change colors. It's kind of a clear amber color, and it will go black as it's exhausted, and you can regenerate this in a hyper solution, hypersaline, with some other chemicals. We have the details on our website for that. But that is a media that you can definitely recharge several times. After recharging, rinse with fresh water really well to get the chlorine and stuff out of the media. But it removes a lot of dissolved organics in the system. And so maybe the question is, well, do I use this or do I use activated carbon? And it kind of depends on your setup. If you've got a large tank with a lot of fish and you're generating a lot of organics, the purifier is probably going to be more economical to use versus the activated carbon. But then, you know, we solve that question a little bit in that the Purifier Plus, we mix our carbon pure activated carbon with the Purifier Plus to give you both activated carbon and the synthetic man-made ion exchange resins for really a super organic, dissolved organic remover. It saves you a little money because the Purifier is more expensive than the activated carbon. The Purifier Plus is going to be less expensive, and a really nice product to help keep that water just sparkly clean. You can see when you're using these before and after how nice the water really looks.
That's good.
And then the last media I talk about, and that this is the first one that we came up with, is our NP active pearls or biopellets. And I don't know, Hillary. I mean, I feel that biopellets aren't talked about as much anymore. I mean, it used, five,
Yeah.
6 years ago, there were lots of different biopellets out there. But maybe that was the problem because they got a little bit of a negative reputation. And so what are biopellets are plastic biomedia, meaning that they're not made from oil, because the big use for biopellets is to make biodegradable plastics. If you look at a drinking water bottle or more and more any of the bottles and it says biodegradable, plant-based, something like that, it's made from these biopellets, which biopellets are made by bacteria. Bacteria are fed, I mean, it can be potato waste, it can be cornstarch, variety of organic material, and the bacteria produce this polymer, which the science has been known for a while. It's becoming more and more economical about how to harvest that. And the nice thing about these biodegradable pellets of this biomedia is that it will degrade in 2 or 3 years completely, versus something that's a plastic made out of oil can last 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years, very, very, not very biodegradable at all. And how these biopellets are used in an aquarium is the media is placed in a reactor, so they're churning. This is, of all the media we've talked about, this is like the only one that's not static. Static meaning, the others you put in a bag and you pass the water through it, but the media is not moving. The biopellets, you want the pellets to be slightly moving and bringing fresh water to them, so it's got oxygen, and bacteria will attach to the pellet because they're actually degrading that pellet using that carbon. And as the bacteria grow, using the carbon from the pellet, they're actually removing nitrate and phosphate from the water. Some people call this solid vodka dose. If you're going to dose vodka in your tank or carbon, liquid carbon, what's the purpose? The purpose of that is to stimulate bacteria growth. And as those bacteria grow, they'll remove nitrate and phosphate from the water. Well, that's what this is doing, is you're providing a carbon source the bacteria can use to grow and assimilate. And as they do that, they're removing nitrate and phosphate from the water column. And biopellets are really good to use if you have a large tank or a smaller tank where you're feeding a lot of food and generating a lot of waste, nitrates and phosphates. The biopellets are quite economical to use. You do need a reactor because you don't want them to be static. You want them to be slowly moving in oxygenated water.
Yes. I wonder if, like, when you're talking about, like, people have kind of come away from using those as if, like, they don't have space for reactors, or they had a hard time, like, getting that nice tumbling action dialed in.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of time, and then you have some people saying, well, you got to tumble it in all 14,000 different directions, which is not true. And they make things so complicated, and then people get turned off by that. But we still sell a lot. We've got a lot of longtime users of our biopellets because they have to be replenished. You're not going to replace them because they're going to disappear as they're used up. So you replenish them. And it does take some time to start seeing an effect, but you will be able to measure the nitrate and phosphate. And if you've got a freshwater system, the biopellets work. They're not strictly salt water. You've got cichlids or you're feeding a lot and you just have a buildup of nitrate phosphate and you're fighting algae, consider biopellets a much more natural way once it's set up, I mean, it does take 3-4 weeks to get it going and start seeing the effect because the bacteria take time to grow on the biopellets. But once you get it going, it's relatively, I said relatively maintenance free. But you're right. People's eyes are, this thing's got to be churning. These pellets they're not moving fast enough, and that's the wrong way. If you churn the pellets too much, they just wear on each other, and you prematurely, they're breaking up and wearing out because of the wear and tear on each pellet against the other one. So just a slow churn is going to be fine. And you'll know if you're not doing it, churning them enough, is they'll start to go black because they'll go anaerobic or anoxic. Then you know you've got to turn the water flow up. But I'm a great believer in using biopellets. It's really a nice natural way. If you're doing a coral reef tank, what's going to happen? The biopellet will grow bacterial biofilm, but as it's churning, the biofilm basically will eventually break off. And that's marine snow right there. That is really nutritious material that the corals will filter feed out of the water and color up. So it's a, you definitely get a 2-for-1 there. Remove nutrients, convert it into food for your corals, and your corals looking better.
That's always a good thing.
Yeah. So depending on your system, like I said, you don't need to use all of these. Like with everything else, you should look at your system and do you have an issue? Are you growing algae? Is my water cloudy, brown? Does the tank smell? You have that smell. Everybody knows what that smell is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Do I have constant high ammonia, constant nitrate or high nitrate or phosphate? I mean, look at the issue. If your tank is looking good and the water quality is good, then maybe you don't need these media. But that tank doesn't really exist. So you're going to need 1 or 2 of these things, to be honest. But the tank will tell you what you need and which media. And I think most people, you need a biomedia. Remove a biomedia. My first job when I joined the industry years ago was the BioWheel. Why that was such a nice system was it was after all the mechanical chemical filtration. So the biofilter kept clean, and the turning of the BioWheel kept the media. And people say, oh, this is a joke. Bacteria can't grow in that. Yes, they can. They really do prefer that. And with our remover in a bag, don't be afraid to take that out and rinse it. I'm not saying throw it in, chlorinated water for a day or two, but just you're doing a water change. You've got a bucket of water, take the media out, give it a couple of quick rinses and put it back in. As you just said a little while ago, you'll see the satisfaction, Hilary, of all that dirt coming out of the media. And that's not bacteria. That's just stuff you don't want in there. So remover, like I mentioned, I'm a big believer in activated carbon in most all tanks. It just does help remove the organics in the system.
And it helps to get rid of smell too.
Yeah,
I don't think
definitely.
we touched on that earlier, but
yeah, well, then that was my mistake. Definitely helps get rid of smell, and nobody likes a stinky aquarium in the system or brown water or just anything like that. So use these wisely, and they'll be the tool that helps you enjoy the tank and get more enjoyment out of your system. And you'll spend more time watching your fish and corals rather than cleaning. Nobody likes to clean things.
no.
Except Hilary.
I like it when it's dirty and I feel like it's clean. I don't like to clean regularly.
Okay. So.
Now I have a question. So obviously this episode is dedicated to the biomedias and the media products that we have, but like, when should you be using these versus using the liquid products? Because some of them, like I'm thinking like Waste Away, it helps to remove organics. Like, why would you use this versus that?
Well, it depends. I mean, Waste Away is going to remove particulate organics. That's going to break down. Okay.
Mhm.
where the activated carbon is going to remove dissolved organics. So the particulate is the stuff that you can remove with a sieve or a sponge or a blue pad or something like that,
Mhm.
where the dissolved organics are the things that give the water its discoloration and its smell. And waste away is not going to work on that very well. You're going to want to use activated carbon for that. Does that make sense?
Yep. So for the, I guess for the almost for the stuff that you can't see.
Right, for this, yeah, for the, yeah. Because yeah, you've got all that tanniny and you know, you can tell when your water's getting that kind of brownish yellow color, and that's what the activated carbon and the purifier will remove.
Good to know.
I think we've touched on
Yeah.
the major parts of the media. You know, they're a tool. Don't use them as a crutch. They don't replace poor maintenance habits. They don't allow you to overcrowd. Don't you know, say you never have to do water changes. They're just part of a tool. And I would say if you're, I'm gonna get on my soapbox here for a second, Hilary. Sorry, because everybody tells, oh, you know, I don't like an aquarium because it's so much work. If you've had that experience, or you're thinking, my aquarium's too much work, then all these different tools are going to help, but they're not going to ease your pain so much. So why is it too much work? Maybe you're overcrowding, maybe you're overfeeding. You know, this is a finite system. Even the big things, you know, systems that Hilary works on, you can't just keep on throwing food and fish in these systems. They have a carrying capacity, and the carrying capacity is kind of the limit of you in terms of how much work you're going to do. You know, I wrote an article years ago because people always, well, what filter do I need? Well, the filter that's best for you is the one that you'll maintain. If you get a sophisticated filter, but you never clean it, it quickly becomes worthless. If it's intimidating or too hard or too much work, we human beings tend to put that off. And so the right filter for you is the one that you know how to clean and you're willing to take the time. And if your aquarium is turned from pleasure to work, then
You should hire
maybe
somebody
you
to
need
come
step.
take care of your tank for you.
Well, there's one option. Okay. And no, neither I nor Hilary, well, no, not me for sure, are available
not
for
me.
cleaning. Yeah, got
I've
enough.
been there, done that. Those days are
Yeah.
long
Good
past.
God. So yes, you could hire someone. But I would say that maybe you need to reconsider the, you know, how many animals you have in there, just what the setup is, because this is supposed to be an enjoyable hobby, not a hobby that, you know, takes all your time and energy and becomes drudgery. That's no longer a hobby.
No, now it might take all of your money, but everything else
be.
should be enjoyable.
That's it. Yes. I've got a hobby like that too. Yeah, we're not going to talk about that. So I think we'll squeeze, maybe think we can get one more of these in before Christmas.
I think so. I've got us scheduled for another Q&A podcast next week.
The Wednesday. Okay. Yeah.
I
see.
don't know if you guys will hear it before Christmas. It'll probably come out the week after, maybe.
Yeah. Well, if you don't, then everyone have a very merry and safe Christmas. And we do appreciate you listening. We've been doing some shows, and it's a full slate next year, Hilary.
Yes, I'm so excited.
We've got lots of shows. We'll be out and about doing aquaculture shows and reef paloozas and aquashellas and more and more and more. We like meeting people, come by and talk. But, you know, until then, info at Dr. Tim's Aquatics or social media. Please get your questions in, because every couple of weeks we do a question and answer, and we like hearing from people.
And make sure to stay tuned on the social media, because I think we have a holiday surprise that is coming your way. So I'm not going to give too much away here, but stay tuned, follow along.
It's green and it's not the Hulk. How's that for a hint?
Give
Too
it
much,
away.
too much information.
Oh, they don't know the exact details of it. So
Oh, that's all I'm gonna say. All right. So thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. And as always, we're available for questions. And if we don't get another one out before the holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everyone, and be safe.
happy holidays, y'all.